She had always loved music ever since she was a little girl. In her small apartment, she would sit for hours listening to old recordings her mother kept on the shelf. Sometimes she would hum along, pretending she was the one playing the piano, imagining herself in a grand concert hall. Her family didn't have much money, and a piano was something they could never afford. But that did not stop her from dreaming. She would tap her fingers on the kitchen table, tracing imaginary keys, feeling the music inside her hands. Growing up, people often told her that music was a dream for someone else, not for her. "Piano is for people with money," her neighbors would say. "You won't make it." Friends at school laughed at her when she talked about wanting to play. They didn't mean to be cruel. They just thought it was impossible. But each word stuck with her, a small weight she carried in her heart. Despite all that, she never stopped believing that one day she could play. Her days were long and busy. She worked at a small cafe, serving drinks and meals to people who didn't even notice her except when they complained. She liked her job well enough. It helped her family, and she liked the rhythm of moving through the cafe, but it was tiring. After her shift, she would return home, make a simple dinner, and then steal moments to practice. She had managed to borrow an old keyboard from a friend, a beat-up thing with missing keys and faint sounds, but it was enough for her. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world seemed to sleep, she would sit at that keyboard and play. Her fingers sometimes fumbled, and the music wasn't perfect. But each sound she produced felt like a step closer to her dream. No one in her life seemed to understand how serious she was about music. Her coworkers would laugh when she mentioned trying to perform someday. "Why waste your time?" they would ask. Even her family, while supportive in small ways, often told her to focus on work or school, to think about practical things. But she knew that music was not just a hobby for her. It was something she could not ignore. Every day without playing felt empty. She would sometimes close her eyes and imagine herself on a stage, lights shining down, and an audience listening to her every note. In those moments, she felt alive. She imagined the feeling of her fingers gliding over the keys, the way music could reach people's hearts. It was a feeling she could not explain to anyone. And she learned to keep it to herself, a private treasure she guarded. One evening, while walking home from work, she saw a poster on a community board. It was an announcement for a local talent show, a small event at the town hall. They were looking for musicians, singers, and performers of all kinds. She stopped and stared at it. Her heart pounded. The thought of playing in front of people made her nervous, but also excited. She could almost hear herself playing in the quiet hall. For the first time, she imagined the possibility that someone might listen and understand her music. For days, she thought about the poster. Doubts crept in, as they always did. What if I fail? She wondered. What if I embarrass myself in front of everyone? But then she remembered the feeling she got when she played alone at night, the feeling that no one could take away. That feeling told her to try. She decided to enter the talent show. Not because she was sure she would win, but because she needed to take the first step. Once she decided, she began preparing in earnest. She stayed up late into the night, practicing the songs she loved. Her keyboard's keys were worn and sticky, making it hard to play, but she did not complain. Every mistake was a lesson. She learned to listen closely, to feel the music in her fingers. She recorded herself on her phone, listening over and over, adjusting her timing, learning to make each note sound the way she imagined. It was not easy. There were nights she wanted to give up, when her fingers hurt and the music sounded wrong. But she kept going. Her friends at work noticed that she seemed quieter these days, more focused. Some asked what she was up to. She told them about the talent show. A few laughed, and some looked doubtful. "Do you really think you can do it?" they asked. She smiled, but inside she felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She did not need them to believe in her. She needed to believe in herself. As the day of the talent show approached, her nerves grew. She visited the hall once, just to look at it. It was a small place, but the stage looked big from her perspective. The seats were empty then, but she imagined them full of people waiting to hear her play. She felt a lump in her throat. This was it. This was the moment she had been dreaming about for years. It's the first real chance to share her music. The night before the show, she barely slept. She practiced one last time, then lay awake in bed, running through the notes in her head. She reminded herself that it was okay to be nervous. She reminded herself that music was her voice, and tonight she would let it speak. She closed her eyes and pictured herself stepping onto the stage, taking a deep breath and playing the first note. In her mind, it sounded perfect. The morning of the talent show arrived, and she felt a mix of excitement and dread. She went through her routine carefully, eating breakfast, checking her outfit, and making sure her keyboard was ready. Her hands were sweaty, and her heart raced. She repeated the songs in her mind, trying to calm herself. She thought about all the times she had practiced, all the small victories that led her here. She told herself that no matter what happened, she was already a winner for trying. When she arrived at the hall, she saw other performers preparing. Some were older, more confident, and better equipped. She felt a twinge of insecurity, but she pushed it aside. She reminded herself that she had something they did not, the music that came from her heart. She watched them perform during the rehearsals and noticed how nervous some of them were too. It comforted her to see that even experienced performers had fears. Finally, it was her turn to rehearse on the stage. She walked up slowly, her heart beating fast. She touched the keys lightly, testing the sound. The first note she played during rehearsal made her flinch. It was slightly off, but she laughed at herself. She adjusted her position, tried again, and felt the music start to flow. She was learning to calm her nerves, to let the music guide her, not her fear. After rehearsal, she returned to the waiting area, exhausted but ready. Throughout the day, she watched other performers and listened to the audience's reactions. Some people clapped politely, some seemed impressed, and some looked bored. She noticed that the audience was unpredictable, that it was not always easy to please everyone. But she also noticed something important. Music had power. When someone played a song beautifully, people stopped, even if just for a moment, and listened. That realization strengthened her resolve. As the evening fell, the hall began to fill with people. Families, friends, and strangers took their seats. The lights dimmed, and the performers were called one by one. She sat backstage, heart pounding, fingers tapping nervously. Every sound she heard made her more anxious, but also more determined. She reminded herself that this was her chance, the moment she had waited for all her life. The stage manager called her name. She took a deep breath and walked out. The hall looked bigger than she had imagined. The audience stared at her, some whispering, some looking doubtful. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, waiting. Her palms were sweaty, her legs a little unsteady. She walked up to the piano, sat down, and took a moment to breathe. She looked at the keys, feeling the familiar shape under her fingers. This was it. She closed her eyes for a second, letting herself imagine the music as she had always heard it in her mind. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys and prepared to play her first note. The next morning, she woke with a mix of excitement and fear. Her body was tense, her mind buzzing with thoughts of the performance. She tried to eat breakfast, but her stomach felt too full of nerves. She reminded herself that the important thing was to focus on the music, not the fear. She went over the songs in her head, imagining each note, each chord, and the way the melody would flow. She knew she had practiced for months, but now it was different. Now she had to play for other people, and that made everything more real. Her keyboard had been moved carefully into the cafe's corner, so she practiced there for a while before leaving. Customers passed by, some noticing her playing, others not. A few friends from work peeked in. One said, "Are you really going to do it?" She smiled and nodded, but said nothing. Deep down, she felt a mixture of excitement and doubt. She knew she could play, but would the audience understand her music? Would they feel the same emotions she felt when she played? She left the cafe early and headed to the hall to get ready. On the way, she passed familiar streets that now seemed unfamiliar, as though her journey was taking her into a new world. She felt the weight of anticipation pressing on her shoulders. She knew she had a chance to prove herself, but the fear of failure was strong. She took slow, steady breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. She reminded herself that mistakes did not mean the end. They were only part of learning and growing. When she arrived at the hall, performers were rehearsing, and the sound of music floated through the air. Some of them were older, with years of experience. Some carried instruments that gleamed under the lights, looking professional and polished. She felt a pang of insecurity, but then she reminded herself that she had something unique. The music that came from her heart. She watched their rehearsals quietly, noticing that even the experienced performers had nerves. This made her feel less alone, as though she belonged here too. Backstage, she set up her keyboard. It was small compared to the grand pianos on stage, but she had learned to make it sing. She adjusted the bench, tested the keys, and went over her music one more time. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to focus on the rhythm and the melodies she had practiced so many times. Every note she pressed brought a sense of familiarity, a reminder that she had done this before, and she could do it again. The hours passed slowly. She watched as singers, dancers, and other musicians performed their pieces. The audience responded with polite claps, some cheers, and occasional murmurs. She noticed a few performers who seemed confident, but she also noticed moments when they faltered, their nerves showing. She realized that fear was normal, and that gave her courage. She could feel her own fear, but she also felt determination. She wanted to share her music with the people in the hall, to let them hear what she had felt for so many years. As the evening approached, the backstage area grew crowded. Performers talked quietly, shared advice, and adjusted their instruments. She mostly stayed to herself, focusing on her music. She practiced quietly, pressing keys softly, listening to the sound, and imagining how it would feel to play in front of the audience. She reminded herself to trust her practice, to trust the music, and to trust herself. The fear was still there, but it became a background hum. Less powerful than her determination, the stage manager called her name for a quick sound check. She walked onto the stage, her heart pounding. The hall looked larger in person, the seats stretching far into the darkness. She approached the keyboard carefully and pressed a few keys. The sound echoed in the hall, and she felt a thrill of excitement. She adjusted her position, played a few scales, and tested the notes she would use in her performance. The first attempt was shaky, but she smiled at herself. She took a deep breath and tried again. Slowly, the notes began to flow, more smoothly this time. She felt the music moving through her, giving her confidence. After the sound check, she returned backstage. Performers were now seated, waiting for the show to start. The lights dimmed in the audience, and a hush fell over the hall. She could hear whispers and shifting seats. The anticipation was thick. She reminded herself that this was just another practice, that she could handle this. She tried to stay calm, focusing on the music she loved and the emotions she wanted to share. Her fingers tapped lightly on her lap, keeping the rhythm in her mind. As her turn approached, she noticed the stage manager motioning for her to get ready. She stood, her knees slightly weak, and walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavier with nervousness, but she pushed forward. Backstage, a few performers wished her luck, and she nodded, appreciating their support. She tried to block out the doubt and focus only on the music. This was her chance, and she was ready to take it. She sat down at the keyboard, feeling the familiar keys beneath her fingers. The hall seemed silent, though the audience was waiting, watching. She took a deep breath, feeling the energy in her chest. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the music she would play, the emotion she would pour into each note. She reminded herself that the first note was the hardest, the one that would set the tone for everything. She could feel the fear and excitement intertwining, but she knew she could do it. Moments before she was called on stage, she thought about all the late nights she had spent practicing, the small victories no one had seen, the music she had carried in her heart for so long. She thought about the doubters who had said she could not succeed, and she felt a quiet strength growing inside her. This was her time to show that dreams could become real, effort and passion could overcome fear. The announcer called her name. She stood, taking a deep breath, and walked toward the stage. Her heart raced, and her hands felt slightly cold. She approached the keyboard, positioned herself, and adjusted the bench. She pressed a key lightly, testing the sound one last time. It felt familiar, comforting, and steady. She closed her eyes, letting herself feel the music. Her fingers hovered over the keys, ready to begin. The audience waited, unaware of the story behind the performer, unaware of the journey that had brought her here. She took another deep breath, feeling the energy of the hall, anticipation of the crowd, and the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She was ready to play. The moment she stepped onto the stage, everything seemed bigger than she had imagined. The hall was filled with people, all looking at her, waiting for her to play. Her heart raced, and her stomach felt like it had butterflies dancing inside. She could hear whispers, soft shuffling of feet, and the occasional cough from the audience. Every sound reminded her that this was real. This was not practice, not rehearsal, not the quiet nights at home. This was her first real performance. She walked slowly toward the keyboard, each step heavy with anticipation. Her hands were slightly shaky, but she reminded herself to breathe, to focus on the music she loved. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers lightly on the keys. The world seemed to hold its breath with her. She could feel the weight of all the doubters, all the people who had said she could not do it, pressing on her shoulders. But she also felt something else, determination. She wanted to prove, most of all to herself, that she belonged here. She looked out at the audience. Some faces were curious, some skeptical, and a few kind smiles shone through. She knew that many had come expecting to be unimpressed, to watch someone fail. That thought made her nervous, but it also gave her focus. She had worked for this moment, practiced for it, dreamed of it, and now it was hers. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She took a deep breath, feeling the energy of the room and the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She closed her eyes for a second, remembering all the nights she had spent practicing in silence, imagining this very moment. She reminded herself that music was not about perfection. It was about feeling. It was about the story she wanted to tell through each note. She pressed the first key. The sound rang out, clear and strong. There was a sudden hush over the audience, as if they had been holding their breath. That first note carried all her hopes, her fears, and her dreams. It resonated through the hall, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. She felt herself melt into the music, letting it guide her fingers, her hands. Her heart, the second note followed, and then the third. Slowly, she built the melody, weaving it through soft and gentle passages, then stronger, more confident chords. Her nerves began to fade as she felt the music flow naturally, as though it had always been a part of her. Each note told a story, and she could feel the audience responding, even if only subtly. Heads turned, eyes widened, and people leaned forward, listening more intently. She could feel the power of the music carrying her forward. Her fingers moved with more confidence, and her body relaxed. She was no longer just a nervous girl playing in front of strangers. She was a storyteller, sharing a part of her soul with everyone in the hall. She played faster, then slower, softer, then louder, expressing the emotion she had felt for years but could never put into words. The audience was captivated, caught in the spell of her music. Some people in the audience began to whisper among themselves, amazed at the skill and emotion she was showing. They had expected an amateur, someone unsure and hesitant. Instead, they were witnessing someone who could take their breath away with a single note. Their doubts started to fade, replaced by awe and curiosity. Even those who had come thinking they would watch a failure now found themselves leaning forward, listening with full attention. Her mind was clear, focused only on the music. She did not think about the audience, the stage, or the pressure. She only thought about the story she wanted to tell, the emotion she wanted to share. Each chord was a word, each melody a sentence, and the entire piece was her voice. The fear that had once weighed so heavily on her shoulders was gone, replaced by confidence and joy. She felt alive in a way she had never felt before. As she played, she noticed the subtle reactions of people around her. A man in the front row smiled softly, his eyes glistening. A woman held her hand over her chest, moved by the music. Children sat quietly, mesmerized, and even some of the skeptical adults could not hide their astonishment. She realized that music could speak in ways words could not, that it could touch hearts and bridge gaps between strangers. That thought gave her even more strength. She continued, pouring her emotions into every note. There were moments of softness, moments of intensity, and moments where she seemed to float above the stage, lost in the music. Her fingers flew over the keys, moving with precision and grace. Every mistake she had feared melted away, replaced by the fluidity of practice, passion, and dedication. The audience was silent, fully absorbed in her performance. Hanging on to each sound she created, she reached the final part of her piece. The music swelled, building to a crescendo that filled the hall with energy and emotion. She played with all her heart, every note ringing out with clarity and purpose. The final chord lingered, echoing through the hall like a whisper and then silence. The kind of silence that happens when people are too stunned to react, when the music has left them speechless. She held her hands over the keys, feeling the vibrations, breathing heavily, but with a sense of triumph. Slowly, the audience began to clap. At first, it was soft, hesitant, and then it grew louder and louder. The clapping turned into cheers, and some people even stood, applauding enthusiastically. She looked up, astonished, seeing the reaction of the crowd. Their doubt had been replaced by admiration and wonder. She had done it. She had played her heart for everyone to hear, and it had worked. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took a small bow. The applause continued, echoing in the hall, and she felt a warmth in her chest she had never known. This was the moment she had dreamed about, the moment she had worked for, the moment she had feared and longed for all at once. She realized that her journey, with all its struggles and late nights, had led her here. She had proved not just to the audience, but to herself, that she could do it, as she stepped away from the keyboard. She felt a mixture of relief, joy, and excitement. The music had carried her through the fear, and now she could finally see the power it held. The audience continued to applaud, some people even standing in appreciation, and she could feel their energy washing over her. She had faced her doubts, her fears, and the skepticism of others, and had emerged victorious. Backstage, she was met with smiles and congratulations from fellow performers. They had seen her on stage, witnessed her talent, and were impressed. Some said quietly, "That was amazing," and others simply nodded, unable to find words. She felt proud, but also humble, realizing that this was only the beginning. The music had opened a door for her, a door to new possibilities, new experiences, new recognition. As she left the hall that night, she walked slowly through the quiet streets. The city seemed different now, brighter, alive in a way it had never been before. She thought about the performance, the first note that had set everything in motion, and the way the audience had responded. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and hope. She knew that this was just the first step in a long journey, but it was a step that had changed everything. Her music had found its voice. She had finally found hers. Once she had played the first few notes and felt the audience's reaction, she felt a surge of confidence. The nervousness that had gripped her moments before melted away. She realized that the music was flowing naturally through her and that the audience was listening with full attention. Their expressions, their gestures, even their silence told her that they were captivated. It was a feeling she had imagined countless times, but had never truly experienced until now. As she continued to play, each note carried more emotion than the last. She moved from soft, delicate passages to stronger, more expressive chords, telling a story through her music. The audience could feel the joy, the sorrow, the excitement, and the hope embedded in each melody. People who had doubted her talent were now leaning forward, hanging on to every note. She felt the energy in the room, a shared connection between herself and the listeners. For the first time, she understood the true power of music. She noticed subtle reactions in the audience. A man in the front row closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. A woman gripped the edge of her seat, tears welling in her eyes. Children stared wide-eyed, mesmerized by the beauty of the sound. Even the skeptics, those who had arrived with doubt in their hearts, could not hide their amazement. She realized that her music had broken through walls of doubt and skepticism. touching hearts in a way she had never imagined. Her fingers moved across the keys with precision and grace. Each movement was confident, yet fluid, as if the music was guiding her rather than the other way around. She allowed herself to feel every note, to express every emotion she had kept inside for so long. The music became an extension of herself, a voice for all the dreams, fears, and hopes she had carried silently. She could feel the audience responding, leaning in. Captivated by the story unfolding before them, she played a passage that she had practiced countless times but now felt entirely new. The notes danced across the room, bright and lively, bringing smiles to faces in the crowd. She added subtle variations, improvisations she had never dared to try before, feeling the thrill of freedom in her music. The audience responded with soft gasps and appreciative murmurs. She smiled to herself, realizing that she was no longer playing for practice or approval. She was playing to share a piece of her soul with the world. As the performance continued, she noticed a change in the audience's demeanor. Those who had whispered doubts earlier were now fully engaged, captivated by her skill and emotion. People who had expected a simple, timid performance were now amazed at the depth and complexity of her music. She felt a sense of pride and joy, not from seeking validation, but from knowing that her music had reached them. It was a transformative moment, both for her and for those listening. The piece she played reached its most powerful section. Her hands moved rapidly, yet smoothly across the keys, creating a cascade of sound that filled every corner of the hall. The intensity of the music was breathtaking, and the audience could not help but be drawn in. The emotion in her performance was tangible, and the room seemed to vibrate with it. Some listeners whispered to one another in awe, while others simply sat, lost in the experience. She felt a deep connection with every person in the hall, knowing that she had captured their attention completely. Despite the complexity of the piece, she felt a sense of ease. Every note came naturally, every chord felt right. She trusted herself, trusting the music she had practiced and nurtured for so long. She allowed herself to become fully immersed in the performance, losing all sense of fear or doubt. She felt as though the music was alive, a living thing flowing through her, connecting her to the hearts of everyone present. This connection was powerful, transformative, and completely exhilarating. As she reached the final passages of her piece, she began to slow the tempo slightly, bringing the music to a gentle, emotional close. She wanted to leave the audience with a sense of wonder, a feeling that the music had taken them on a journey. Each note lingered, resonant and clear, until finally she reached the last chord. It rang out, full and complete, echoing through the hall. She held her hands over the keys for a moment, savoring the silence that followed. The moment of shared awe between her and the audience. The applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than she had imagined. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and whistling. She felt overwhelmed, a rush of emotions flooding her chest. Pride, joy, relief, and gratitude all mingled together. She had faced her fears, defied the doubts of others, and shared her music in a way that touched hearts. The audience's reaction was more than she could have hoped for, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She took a bow, her hands trembling slightly, and looked out at the faces of the audience. Their smiles, their tears, their enthusiastic applause were proof that her music had reached them. Some people shouted words of praise, while others simply clapped, moved by the emotion she had conveyed. She felt a quiet, powerful satisfaction, knowing that she had given them something meaningful, something unforgettable. Backstage, she was greeted by fellow performers and organizers who congratulated her on her performance. Their words were warm and sincere, acknowledging the skill, emotion, and courage she had displayed. She felt proud, not just for herself, but for the journey that had brought her to this point. The months of practice, the late nights, the self-doubt, and the small victories had all led to this moment. It was a triumph of perseverance, dedication. Even after leaving the hall, she felt the energy of the performance lingering. The memory of the first note, the connection with the audience, and the emotion of the music stayed with her. She knew that this experience had changed her, that it had given her confidence and inspiration to continue pursuing her dream. She had proven to herself that her talent was real and that her music could touch the hearts of others. As she walked home through the quiet streets, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The people who doubted her, the obstacles she had faced, and the moments of self-doubt all seemed smaller now. She realized that the true reward was not just the applause, but the feeling of connection, the joy of sharing her music, and the knowledge that she had overcome her fears. She felt stronger, more confident, and more determined to continue growing as a musician. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the future. She imagined more performances, new songs, and the possibility of inspiring others with her music. She knew there would still be challenges, still be moments of doubt, but she also knew that she had the courage and talent to face them. She fell asleep with a sense of peace, knowing that she had taken a significant step toward realizing her dreams. The music had transformed her, and she was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, she woke with a sense of quiet joy still lingering from the previous night. The memory of the performance, the applause, the faces in the audience all replayed in her mind like a beautiful dream. She sat by the window, sipping tea, reflecting on what had happened. It felt surreal that only a few hours ago, Shay had been on stage, facing her fears and pouring her heart into the music. And now, the world felt brighter, full of possibility and hope. As she prepared for the day, her phone buzzed with messages. Some were from friends who had attended the show, praising her performance and expressing their amazement. Others were from people she barely knew who had seen clips online or heard about her talent through word of mouth. Their words were filled with admiration and encouragement, and she felt a warmth in her heart. She realized that her music had touched more people than she had imagined, and that thought made her feel proud and grateful. Throughout the day, she noticed small changes around her. At work, colleagues who had once doubted her now spoke with respect and curiosity. They asked questions about her performance, complimented her talent, and even offered words of encouragement. It was a reminder that perception could change when people saw the truth of someone's abilities. She smiled quietly, realizing that her courage to step onto the stage had not only affected the audience, but also those close to her daily life. The local community began to take notice as well. Invitations came for her to perform at other events, small gatherings at first, and then larger ones. People wanted to hear her music, to experience the emotion and skill that had captivated so many. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness at these new opportunities, but she also felt a sense of responsibility. She knew she had been given a platform. She wanted to use it to share her music authentically and passionately. Despite the new attention and opportunities, she remained grounded. She continued to practice, to refine her skills, and to explore new pieces of music. Each day she pushed herself a little further, learning new techniques, experimenting with compositions, and allowing her creativity to grow. She knew that talent alone was not enough. It required dedication, effort, and a willingness to keep learning. She embraced this challenge, finding joy in the process of becoming a better musician. Her family noticed a change in her as well. She carried herself with more confidence, spoke with more certainty, and smiled more freely. They had always supported her quietly, but now they saw the results of her hard work and determination. Their pride and encouragement further fueled her motivation. She realized that her journey was not just about her music, but also about showing those she loved what was possible. When one dared to follow their dreams, she also began to inspire others around her. Friends who had once doubted their own abilities started to pursue their interests with renewed vigor. Colleagues found courage to explore creative projects they had set aside. The ripple effect of her courage and dedication became apparent, and she felt a sense of fulfillment knowing that her journey had motivated others to believe in themselves as the days turned into weeks. She reflected on the performance that had changed everything. She thought about the first note that had shocked the audience, the way it had captured their attention, and the journey that had led her to that moment. She understood that her success was not an overnight miracle, but the result of countless hours of practice, perseverance, and self-belief. It was a lesson that she carried with her, that dedication, courage, passion could overcome doubt and obstacles. she continued to perform at events, gradually gaining recognition and respect. People came to see her not because of novelty, but because they valued the emotion and skill she brought to her music. Each performance was a new opportunity to connect with people, to share a part of herself, and to touch hearts. She found that the more she gave of herself through music, the more she received in return: joy, connection, and the satisfaction of knowing she was making a difference. Despite her growing reputation, she remained humble. She remembered the nights she had spent practicing in silence, the small victories no one had witnessed, and the fear she had faced before stepping onto the stage. Those memories kept her grounded, reminding her that true fulfillment came not from fame or applause, but from the love of music and the joy of sharing it with others. She also began to mentor young musicians in her community, sharing her experiences, offering guidance, and encouraging them to pursue their dreams. She wanted them to understand that talent alone was not enough, that perseverance and self-belief were equally important. She found great satisfaction in seeing their growth, their courage, and their excitement as they developed their skills and discovered their voices. Her life began to take on a rhythm she had never experienced before. Mornings were filled with practice and preparation, afternoons with teaching and mentorship, and evenings with performances or community events. She felt a balance between her passion and her responsibilities, and she thrived in the harmony of this new life. She understood that success was not about reaching a single moment, but about building a life around what she loved. Through it all, she never forgot the people who had doubted her at the beginning. Their skepticism had fueled her determination, and their doubts had made the triumph of that first performance even sweeter. She realized that doubt was not always negative. It could be a challenge, a push to prove oneself and grow stronger. She carried this understanding with her, using it to stay motivated and focused on her goals. As months passed, her reputation grew, and she became known not only for her talent, but also for her dedication, humility, and authenticity. People admired her for her music, but also for the way she had faced challenges and fears, and for the way she inspired others to pursue their dreams. She had become a symbol of perseverance, courage, and the transformative power of music. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she sat alone at the piano in the quiet hall, reflecting on her journey. She pressed a key softly, feeling the sound resonate, and smiled. The music still brought her joy, still moved her heart, and still connected her to others in ways words could not. She realized that this was only the beginning, that there were many more notes to play, many more stories to tell, many more hearts to touch. She understood that her journey was about more than just talent. It was about courage, determination, resilience, and the willingness to follow one's passion despite fear and doubt. She knew that every note she played carried a part of herself, and that the world needed music, stories, and voices like hers. She felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment, knowing that she had not only discovered her talent, but had also embraced it fully. Her life had changed in ways she could not have imagined. She had gone from being a quiet dreamer, doubted by many, to a confident musician, admired and respected. She had faced her fears, shared her music, and found her place in the world. And through it all, she remained true to herself, her passion, and the love of music that had guided her from the very beginning. She knew that her journey was ongoing, that there would be new challenges, new doubts, and new opportunities. But she also knew that she had the strength, courage, and talent to face them all, and that each step forward would continue to shape her story and inspire others along the way. Months after her first performance, her life had changed in ways she had never imagined. Invitations to perform at local events had grown into offers for bigger stages. People began recognizing her on the street, sometimes smiling, sometimes asking for a performance. She was still the same person at heart, humble and focused, but the world now saw her differently. She was no longer just the quiet girl with a dream. She was a musician who could move people with a single note. She continued to practice every day, sometimes for hours, perfecting old pieces and exploring new ones. Music had become not only a passion, but a discipline, something she approached with dedication and care. She experimented with different styles, learning to express emotions through subtle changes in tempo, tone, and rhythm. Every note she played was a reflection of her growth, not just as a musician, but as a person. Her confidence had grown, but she never lost the humility that had carried her. Through the early struggles, performances became a regular part of her life. She played at small cafes, community halls, and eventually larger venues. Each audience was different, each performance unique. Sometimes people came with high expectations, and other times they arrived with skepticism. She learned to read the room, to feel the energy of the audience, and to adjust her music accordingly. She found joy not just in playing, but in connecting with people, in sharing the emotions she had carefully cultivated over years of practice, despite her growing recognition. She remained grounded. She never forgot the nights she had spent practicing alone, the times when she had doubted herself, and the people who had told her she could not succeed. Those memories were her anchor, reminding her that true achievement came from perseverance and heart, not just applause. She approached every performance with respect for the music and the audience, knowing that each moment was a chance to create something meaningful. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a regional music festival, an event that would bring together talented musicians from across the area. It was an opportunity to showcase her skills on a larger stage and to meet other musicians. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This would be a new challenge, a chance to see how far she had come and to learn from others. She accepted the invitation, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and determination.